God is with you tonight. Not in the loudness of the world, not in the rush of the day, but here in this quiet moment where nobody else can fully hear the thoughts inside your heart. Because something inside you was searching for comfort, even if you could not explain it. And before this night carries you into sleep, I want you to know something. God has not stepped away from your life. Not during the difficult moments, not during the unanswered prayers, not even during the nights when you secretly wondered if anyone truly understood what you were carrying inside. Because sometimes the deepest loneliness is not being physically alone. It feels like nobody sees the weight you silently carry every single day. The pressure to stay strong, the thoughts that grow louder once the world becomes quiet at night. But tonight, you do not have to fight those thoughts alone anymore. So for the next little while, do not think about tomorrow. Do not replay every mistake. Do not try solving your entire life before sleep. Just listen and let your heart slowly become still. Imagine yourself sitting beside a calm lake late at night. The water is quiet. The air is cool. The stars above you barely move. And beside you, without speaking loudly, God simply sits there with you. Not demanding perfection from you, just staying near you. Because sometimes God's presence feels less like thunder and more like peace, quietly entering a tired soul. And maybe tonight, that peace is exactly what your heart has been missing. You know, some people laugh all day, yet cry silently at night. People who encourage everyone else, while secretly feeling empty themselves. People who keep moving forward, even though inside they feel emotionally worn out. Maybe you understand that feeling. Maybe lately, life has felt heavier than usual. And maybe part of you has been wondering how much longer you can carry everything alone. So tonight, let this be a resting place, not just physical sleep, but inner rest. The kind where your breathing slows down, your racing thoughts soften, and your heart finally remembers what peace feels like again. Because God is still with you. Even when life feels uncertain, even when prayers seem delayed, even when your emotions feel difficult to explain, even now, in this exact moment, while darkness fills your room and the world outside grows silent, God is still staying beside you, watching over you while you breathe, protecting you while you rest, and holding together the pieces of your life that currently feel confusing. So tonight, you do not need to fear tomorrow. You do not need to carry every burden into the morning. For now, just rest. Rest knowing that heaven has not forgotten you. Rest knowing that your story is not over. Rest knowing that even in quiet nights like this, God is still with you. Now, for the next little while, do not think about anything you need to do tomorrow. Let tomorrow stay far away for now. Tonight, your only responsibility is rest. So allow these quiet words from Scripture to slowly settle over your mind, like soft rain in the darkness. Psalm 23 says, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul." Notice those words carefully tonight. He restores my soul. Not only your energy, not only your strength, but the hidden part of you that life has quietly worn down. The exhausted part, the anxious part, the part of you that kept going even when your heart felt overwhelmed. God sees that part too. And tonight, He wants to bring rest to it. He leads me beside still waters. Still waters. Not chaos. Not noise. Not fear. Stillness. Peace. Calmness. Maybe your mind has felt like rough waves lately. Thought after thought. Worry after worry. Pressure after pressure. But God has always been the one who leads tired souls away from storms and back toward peace again. So tonight, let your heart become like those still waters. Slow, quiet, at rest. Psalm 121 says, "I lift up my eyes to the hills. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth." Tonight, your help does not come from overthinking. It does not come from fear. It does not come from carrying everything alone. Your help comes from God, the same God who watches over oceans, holds the stars in place, and still notices every silent tear hidden inside a human heart. And maybe that is what makes God's love so beautiful. Out of billions of people in this world, He still sees you. He still cares for you. He still stays beside you on nights like this. He will not let your foot slip. He who watches over you will not slumber. Even while you sleep tonight, God remains awake, watching over your life, protecting your future, guarding your heart in ways you cannot even see. So tonight, you are allowed to rest. You are allowed to stop carrying every burden for a few hours, because God is still awake even while you sleep. And maybe for the first time today, your heart can finally breathe again. Psalm 46 says, "God is our refuge and strength, and ever-present help in trouble." Ever-present. Not distant. Not absent. Not watching from far away. Present. Here with you now. In this quiet room. In this late hour of the night. in every silent emotion resting inside your heart. And maybe tonight, that is all your soul truly needed to remember, that you are not walking through life alone. Psalm 34 says, "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit." Close to the brokenhearted, not ashamed of them, not disappointed in them. Close to them, which means even on the nights where your heart feels heavy, God does not move away from you. He moves closer, closer to your fears, closer to your exhaustion, closer to the quiet pain nobody else fully sees. So tonight, you do not need to hide your emotions from God. You can simply rest in His presence exactly as you are. Psalm 139 says, "You have searched me, Lord, and you know me." God knows the version of you that other people never see, the hidden worries, the overthinking, the silent battles, the nights you smiled outwardly while struggling inwardly, and somehow, even knowing every part of you completely, He still loves you deeply, still stays beside you faithfully, still watches over you tonight with gentleness and care. When I lie down and sleep, I wake again, because the Lord sustains me. Psalm 3 says, notice how peaceful those words feel. Not fear, not panic, not restless striving, just sleep. Because the heart was never designed to carry endless anxiety alone. And tonight, God is gently asking you to release what has been weighing you down, little by little, breath by breath, thought by thought. Psalm 27 says, "The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear?" Tonight, fear does not get the final word over your life. Not fear of the future, not fear of failure, not fear of uncertainty. Because even when the road ahead feels unclear, God already stands in tomorrow before you arrive there. Which means tonight, you can finally rest your mind. You do not need to control everything tonight. You only need to rest. Psalm 62 says, "Truly my soul finds rest in God." Rest, not temporary distraction, not emotional numbness. Real rest, the kind that slowly quiets the storm inside a tired mind, the kind that softens heavy thoughts, the kind that reminds the soul it is finally safe again. And as your breathing becomes slower tonight, may that rest begin filling your heart now. Very gently, very quietly, like moonlight resting over calm water beneath the night sky. And now, as this peaceful night continues to grow quieter around you, I want you to let your body relax even more deeply. Feel the weight of your blanket. Feel the stillness of the room. Feel the calmness slowly settling into your breathing. There's nowhere else you need to be right now. Nothing you need to solve in this moment. Tonight, you are simply resting beneath the presence of God. Psalm 91 says, "He who dwells in the shelter of the Most High will rest in the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress, my God in whom I trust, the shelter of the Most High." What a peaceful image that is tonight. A place of safety, a place where fear grows quiet, a place where anxious thoughts no longer control the heart. And maybe tonight, your soul has been longing for a place like that. A place where you no longer need to stay emotionally alert. A place where your mind can finally stop racing. A place where you can simply rest, knowing God is watching over you. And while the world outside keeps moving, you are safe here in His presence. He will cover you with His feathers, and under His wings you will find refuge. Like a child resting safely through the night, God watches over weary souls with gentleness, not harshness, not anger, gentleness. Even now, while your eyes slowly grow heavier, God remains close beside you, protecting your heart in ways you cannot fully see. Psalm 63 says, "On my bed, I remember you. I think of you through the watches of the night. Because you are my help, I sing in the shadow of your wings. Through the watches of the night." God has always been near during sleepless nights, near during silent tears, near during overthinking, near during moments where the soul quietly whispers, "I'm tired." And maybe tonight, instead of fighting your exhaustion, you can finally place it into God's hands. You do not have to carry every burden through the darkness alone, because God has never abandoned tired hearts. Never. Psalm 16 says, "I keep my eyes always on the Lord. With Him at my right hand, I will not be shaken." Life can feel uncertain sometimes. People change. Situations change. Plans fall apart unexpectedly. But God remains steady, constant, faithful. And while so many things in life may feel unstable, God is still holding you. Even if your emotions feel fragile, even if your thoughts feel heavy, even if your heart feels exhausted, God is still steady. In peace, you will make me dwell in safety. Not temporary peace, not pretend peace, real peace. The The kind that slowly settles into the deepest parts of the soul. The kind that softens the tension hidden inside your chest. The kind that allows tired eyes to finally close without fear. And tonight, that peace is wrapping around you now. Slowly, quietly, gently. Psalm 130 says, I wait for the Lord. My whole being waits, and in His word I put my hope. Sometimes healing happens slowly. Sometimes peace returns little by little. And sometimes God works quietly in the parts of life we cannot yet understand. But even in waiting, there can still be peace. Even in uncertainty, there can still be rest. Because your future is not resting in fear tonight. It is resting in the hands of God. And those hands have never stopped holding you. Not once. Psalm 118 says, The Lord is with me. I will not be afraid. Tonight, read those words slowly within your heart. The Lord is with me, not might be, not maybe, is with me in this room, in this moment, in this night. And perhaps that is why your soul can finally begin relaxing now. Because deep down, the human heart rests differently once it remembers it is no longer alone. So let your breathing become slower now. Let every scripture settle deeply into your spirit. Let every fearful thought slowly drift further away. And as the quietness of this night surrounds you, may your heart continue sinking deeper into peace. Because tonight is not a night for carrying burdens. Tonight is a night for rest. Tonight, before the night grows even quieter, I want to tell you a story. Not a loud story. Not a story filled with chaos. But one of those quiet stories that slowly settle into the heart, the same way rain settles softly against a window late at night. And maybe, without even realizing it, you have known someone like the person in this story before. Or perhaps, you will recognize pieces of yourself. Because this story is about a person who spent a very long time trying to appear okay. Someone who learned how to smile at the right moments, say the right things, and keep moving through life even when something deep inside them felt unsettled. Most people who passed by them every day would never have noticed it. To the world, they looked responsible, capable, calm. But there are certain kinds of exhaustion that cannot be seen from the outside. The kind carried quietly behind the eyes. The kind hidden inside late-night thoughts. The kind that slowly grows heavier in silence. And over time, this person became so used to carrying emotional weight alone that they almost forgot what inner peace even felt like. Maybe you understand that feeling tonight. The feeling of continuing forward simply because life expects you to. The feeling of becoming tired in ways sleep alone cannot fix. And perhaps that is why this story matters. Because some stories are not meant to entertain the mind. Some stories gently reach places inside the heart that ordinary words cannot touch. So while the world around you grows still tonight, I want you to simply listen. No rushing. No trying to analyze everything. Just allow the story to unfold slowly, like footsteps moving quietly through the darkness. And as this story begins, I want you to imagine a city long after midnight. Most windows are dark. The roads are nearly empty. A cold breeze moves softly through silent streets. Somewhere far away, a train passes faintly in the distance. And beneath the glow of old streetlights, someone walks alone carrying thoughts too heavy to explain to anyone else. That is where this story begins. And on that particular night, the city felt strangely distant to him. Not physically distant, emotionally distant. As though the entire world had continued moving forward, while some quiet part inside him had slowly fallen behind. The streets were damp from rain that had passed earlier in the evening. Small reflections of yellow streetlights shimmered across the pavement beneath his footsteps. A few cars moved through intersections far away, their sounds fading almost as quickly as they appeared. But other than that, there was mostly silence. The kind of silence that makes a person hear their own thoughts more clearly than they want to. He pulled his jacket closer against the cold air and continued walking without any real direction. Past closed shops, past sleeping apartment buildings, past windows glowing softly in the darkness where other people had already found rest for the night. And for a brief moment, he wondered what that kind of peace must feel like. Because lately, even sleep had become difficult. Not because his body lacked exhaustion. His body was exhausted, but his mind never seemed to stop moving. Thoughts about unfinished responsibilities. Thoughts about mistakes he wished he could revisit and change. Thoughts about conversations that still echoed long after they had ended. And beneath all of those thoughts, a quieter fear he rarely admitted even to himself. The fear that maybe he had been carrying life alone for far too long. He had not always felt this way. There was a time when life felt lighter, simpler. Back when small things still brought joy naturally. Back when mornings did not feel emotionally heavy before they even began. But somewhere along the way, between responsibilities, disappointments, long days, and silent struggles, something inside him had become tired. Not dramatically tired. Not the kind people notice immediately. Just slowly, deeply, quietly tired. The kind of tiredness a person hides so well that eventually even they stop talking about it. As he continued walking through the sleeping city, he noticed an old diner still open near the corner of a quiet street. The warm light shining through the windows stood out against the darkness around it. Inside, only a few people remained. A truck driver drinking coffee silently near the counter. An elderly woman reading beneath dim yellow lights. and a tired young employee wiping tables slowly while soft music played somewhere in the background. For reasons he could not explain, he stopped walking. Then, after standing there for a few seconds in the cold night air, he quietly stepped inside. A small bell above the door gave a soft sound as he entered, and immediately, warmth surrounded him. The smell of coffee, the faint sound of dishes in the kitchen, the low hum of lights overhead. Simple things, ordinary things. Yet somehow, after the heaviness of the night outside, those ordinary things felt comforting. He chose a booth near the window and sat down quietly. For a while, he simply stared outside at the empty street without saying anything, almost as if his mind had become too tired to keep pretending, too tired to keep running from itself. And sometimes, before healing begins, a person first reaches that moment. The moment where they can no longer carry everything the way they used to. A waitress eventually walked over to his table carrying a small notepad in her hand. She looked older, perhaps somewhere in her late 60s. Soft gray hair, gentle eyes, the kind of face that seemed naturally calm even without trying. She did not rush him when she arrived at the table, did not force cheerful conversation the way some people do late at night. Instead, she simply stood there quietly for a moment and asked in a soft voice, "One night?" Just 2 words. Yet something about the way she said them felt strangely sincere. Not curious, not intrusive, just understanding. He gave a small tired smile and nodded once. "Yeah," he answered quietly. "Something like that." She glanced toward the window beside him where rainwater still clung to the glass from earlier in the night. Then she looked back at him gently. "The world feels heavier after midnight sometimes," she said. And for reasons he could not fully explain, those words stayed with him. Because they were true. There are certain emotions people can ignore during the day. But at night, those same emotions often sit beside us quietly asking to be noticed. The waitress handed him a menu, though neither of them seemed particularly concerned about the food itself. After another moment, she asked, "Coffee?" He hesitated briefly before nodding again. "Please." She smiled softly and walked away toward the counter. And as he sat there listening to the distant clatter of dishes and the quiet hum of the diner, something inside him slowly began relaxing. Not healing completely, not suddenly becoming happy, just softening, like a knot inside the chest loosening little by little. Sometimes healing begins very quietly, not with dramatic moments, not with instant answers, but with small moments where the soul finally stops bracing itself against the world. A few minutes later, the waitress returned carrying a warm mug of coffee. Steam curled upward slowly into the dim light above the table. She placed it in front of him carefully. Then, unexpectedly, she sat down across from him. Not in a strange way. Not invasive. Almost grandmotherly. as though she had recognized a kind of exhaustion she had seen many times before. For a while neither of them spoke. The diner remained peaceful around them. The truck driver near the counter quietly reading something on his phone. The soft ticking of an old clock hanging near the kitchen doorway. Rain beginning lightly again outside. And in the middle of all that stillness, the waitress finally spoke. "You know," she said softly, "people think exhaustion always comes from working too hard." She folded her hands gently across the table. "But sometimes people are tired because they've been carrying sadness for too long." He lowered his eyes toward the coffee in front of him. Something about hearing another human being say those words out loud made it harder to keep pretending. Because deep down, he knew she was right. There are burdens the body can carry. And then there are burdens the heart carries silently for months, sometimes years. The waitress leaned back slightly and looked toward the rain outside the window. "Life can make people lonely in strange ways," she continued quietly. "Even surrounded by others." The room grew still again after that. And for the first time in a very long while, he felt seen. Not because someone solved his problems. Not because someone offered perfect advice. But because another human soul had quietly recognized his pain without needing him to explain every detail. And sometimes, that kind of understanding becomes the first light a weary heart sees after a very long darkness. He wrapped both hands around the warm mug and sat quietly for a while after that. Outside the diner window, rain continued falling in soft silver lines beneath the streetlights. The city had become even quieter now, almost as if the entire night itself had slowed down. And strangely, for the first time in many months, he no longer felt the need to immediately fill every silence. The waitress stood slowly from the booth. "Take your time," she said gently. Then she returned behind the counter, leaving him alone again with his thoughts and the quiet warmth surrounding him. But something inside him had shifted. Only slightly. Like the first tiny crack in a wall someone has spent years building around their emotions. He looked down into the coffee absent-mindedly while memories drifted slowly through his mind. Not dramatic memories. Small ones. His mother laughing softly in the kitchen years ago while rain tapped against windows. Long drives with music playing quietly through open car windows during summer evenings. Moments where life once felt simpler, before worry began attaching itself to almost every thought. And as those memories passed through him, he realized something painful. He could remember the last time he truly rested physically. But he could no longer remember the last time he felt inwardly at peace. That realization sat heavily inside him. Because many people continue functioning long after their spirit has grown exhausted. They continue answering messages. Continue showing up. Continue smiling politely. While inwardly feeling disconnected from themselves, from others, sometimes even from God. And over time, they become so accustomed to surviving, they forget how to simply live. The rain outside became steadier. Water slid gently down the glass beside him in slow, uneven patterns. He watched it absent-mindedly until he noticed something near the edge of the window. A small plant sitting alone on the diner windowsill. Its leaves were slightly bent. Not dead, just neglected. One side leaned toward the glass, stretching quietly toward the faint streetlight outside. For some reason, he kept staring at it. Then the waitress noticed his attention from across the diner and smiled faintly. "That little thing refuses to give up," she said. He glanced toward her curiously. She walked over slowly, stopping beside the table. "I almost threw it away a few months ago," she admitted softly. "Thought it was dying." She gently touched one of the leaves. "But sometimes living things just need time, light, and care before they begin growing again." Her words lingered in the air between them. Simple words, yet they landed somewhere deep inside him. Because lately, he had been treating himself like someone permanently broken, as though exhaustion had become his identity, as though struggling quietly meant he had somehow failed at life. But maybe, just maybe, his soul was not beyond healing. Maybe it was simply tired. Tired from carrying too much for too long without rest. The waitress returned to the counter again. The old clock near the kitchen ticked softly forward. Midnight slowly gave way to the deeper hours of morning. And in that small diner filled with dim light and rain-soaked silence, something fragile but important began awakening inside him. Hope. Not loud hope. Not unrealistic optimism. Just a quiet feeling that perhaps life was not over emotionally. That perhaps peace was still possible, even for someone as tired as he had become. He remained there for a long time after that, not checking his phone, not watching the clock, just listening quietly to the gentle sounds around him. The rain, the distant hum of traffic somewhere far away, the soft clinking of dishes behind the counter. There was something strangely comforting about ordinary moments when they were not rushed. And perhaps that is one of the reasons weary souls become so tired in this world. Because everything moves too fast. People hurry through conversations, hurry through meals, hurry through mornings, hurry through life itself. Yet the human heart was never created to live without stillness. The waitress eventually returned carrying a small slice of pie on a plate. He looked up slightly confused. "I didn't order that," he said quietly. "I know," she answered with a faint smile. "Some nights people need kindness more than menus." For a brief second, he almost laughed. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a small, real laugh that surprised even him. Because it had been a long time since something felt warm enough to reach that part of him. The waitress sat across from him again. This time neither of them seemed uncomfortable with the silence. It had become peaceful now, like two tired souls simply sharing the quietness of the night together. After a while she looked toward the rain outside the window and spoke again. "Can I tell you something?" she asked gently. He nodded. She folded her hands together loosely. When my husband passed away, she began softly, I stopped sleeping properly for almost a year. The room suddenly felt even quieter. Not heavy, just honest. People kept telling me to stay strong, she continued. But grief doesn't disappear because someone says the right words. Her eyes drifted toward the old clock near the kitchen. Some nights I would sit awake until morning listening to the house creak in the dark, wondering how the world could continue so normally after losing someone you love. He listened carefully without interrupting, because deep pain recognizes deep pain. And sometimes people who have suffered quietly learn how to recognize sadness in others without many words at all. The waitress smiled faintly to herself. One night an old pastor told me something I never forgot, she said. She paused briefly before continuing. He said, God often does his gentlest work inside people during seasons that feel unbearably quiet. The words settled softly into the stillness around them. Gentlest work. Not loud miracles. Not dramatic moments. Gentle work. The kind that slowly heals wounded places over time. The kind that teaches exhausted hearts how to breathe again. He lowered his gaze toward the untouched pie sitting in front of him. And slowly, almost reluctantly, he admitted something aloud he had not said honestly in a very long time. I think I'm tired of carrying everything by myself. The confession came out quieter than he expected. Almost fragile. The waitress did not rush to answer immediately. Instead, she nodded slowly, as though she understood the weight behind those words. Because sometimes the hardest sentence for a person to say is not I'm hurt. It is. I can't do this alone anymore. Outside, rain continued falling steadily beneath the sleeping city. But inside the small diner filled with warm light and midnight silence, the walls around his heart had finally begun coming down. He glanced toward the front window again. The rain had almost completely stopped now. Tiny drops still clung to the glass, catching reflections from the street lights outside like scattered pieces of gold. The city looked different after rain. Cleaner somehow. Quieter. As though the storm had washed something away. And sitting there in the warmth of that small diner, he wondered if human hearts could become like that too. Not perfect, not untouched by pain, but softened, renewed little by little after difficult seasons. The waitress disappeared briefly into the kitchen and returned carrying a folded towel. She began wiping nearby tables slowly, unhurried by the late hour. For a while neither of them spoke again. Yet the silence no longer felt uncomfortable. It felt restful, like the kind of silence a person experiences when they no longer feel pressure to pretend. Then unexpectedly, the lights flickered once overhead. Only briefly, but enough to make both of them glance upward. The waitress smiled faintly. This old place has been doing that for years, she said softly. He looked around the diner more carefully after that. The cracked leather boots, the faded floor tiles, the old clock ticking near the kitchen. Nothing about the place was modern or impressive. Yet strangely, it felt alive in a way many beautiful places did not. Because peace rarely comes from perfection. Sometimes peace comes from simply being somewhere honest, somewhere real. He finally took a bite of the pie sitting in front of him. One apple, cinnamon, the kind of simple taste that instantly brings back forgotten memories from childhood. And without warning, he suddenly remembered sitting at a kitchen table many years earlier while his grandmother baked late into the evening. He could almost hear the soft music she used to play. Could almost smell cinnamon filling the house. Back then, life had felt slower, safer somehow. Before bills, before pressure, before disappointments taught him how fragile adulthood could become. And for a brief, painful moment, he missed the person he used to be. The version of himself who laughed easier, trusted easier, rested easier. The waitress must have noticed the change in his expression because she spoke gently from across the room. Memories can sneak up on people at night, she said. He nodded quietly. Then after a long hesitation, he finally asked something that had been sitting heavily inside him for a very long time. Do you ever feel like life turned into something completely different than what you imagined? The question lingered softly between them. The waitress stopped wiping the table and leaned against the counter thoughtfully. Oh yes, she answered quietly. Almost everyone feels that eventually. There was no bitterness in her voice, only honesty. When we're young, she continued, we imagine life moving in straight lines. We think happiness will arrive once everything finally goes according to plan. She gave a faint knowing smile. But life rarely moves in straight lines. The old clock ticked softly behind her. Sometimes hearts break. Sometimes dreams change. Sometimes people lose pieces of themselves they thought they would never lose. He lowered his gaze again silently, because every word felt true. And perhaps one of the loneliest realizations in adulthood is discovering how a different reality can feel from the life you once imagined for yourself. But then the waitress said something unexpected. Still, she murmured gently, I think some of the kindest people in this world are the ones who've had to rebuild themselves quietly. He looked up again. She smiled softly toward him. Pain can make people colder, but sometimes it makes them gentler too. The diner grew still once more after that. And somewhere deep inside him, something began shifting again. Not just exhaustion now, not just sadness, but the quiet realization that maybe his difficult years had not destroyed him completely. Maybe they had simply changed him in ways he was only beginning to understand. The waitress walked back toward the counter and adjusted the small radio sitting near the coffee machine. Soft music drifted quietly through the diner again. Old music. Gentle music. The kind that does not demand attention, but slowly fills empty spaces. Outside, the clouds had finally begun breaking apart. A faint silver glow from the moon appeared between them, reflecting across the wet streets beyond the window. The night no longer felt heavy in the same way it had earlier. Still quiet, still slow, but no longer lonely. He leaned back against the booth and closed his eyes for a moment. Not to sleep, just to rest. And for the first time in a very long while, he noticed something strange. His thoughts had become quieter. The endless pressure inside his mind had softened enough for silence to finally exist between thoughts again. No racing worries. No mental noise pulling him in every direction. Just stillness. And perhaps that is why peaceful places matter so much. Because sometimes people do not need more advice. Sometimes they simply need a place where their soul feels safe enough to unclench. When he opened his eyes again, the waitress was standing near the front window looking outside. "Morning will be here soon," she said gently. He glanced toward the clock. She was right. The night had passed slowly without him noticing. And somehow, that realization felt comforting. Because earlier that evening, time had felt unbearable. But now, sitting beneath the warm diner lights with rain fading outside and silence resting softly around him, the night no longer felt like something he needed to escape from. It felt like something he had survived. The waitress turned toward him again. "Can I tell you something else?" she asked quietly. He nodded. She folded her arms loosely. Most people think healing happens when life suddenly becomes easy. Her expression softened. But I don't think that's true. She looked briefly toward the dark streets outside. "I think healing begins the moment a person stops running from their pain long enough to sit honestly with it." The words settled deeply inside him. Because for years, he had distracted himself from exhaustion instead of listening to it. Worked harder, stayed busier, filled silence with noise, but none of it had actually brought peace. It had only delayed the moment his soul finally admitted it was tired. The waitress smiled gently. "The heart is a little like the ocean," she continued. "Storms can shake the surface violently, but deep beneath the waves there is stillness most people never see." He listened carefully. "And I think God meets people there," she whispered. "Beneath all the noise, beneath all the pretending, beneath all the fear." Outside, the first faint hint of dawn had begun touching the horizon far beyond the sleeping city. Darkness was still present, but morning was quietly approaching. And somehow, that felt meaningful. Because many people believe healing arrives suddenly like sunlight flooding through a window. But often, healing arrives the same way morning does. Slowly, quietly, almost unnoticed at first. Until one day a person realizes the darkness no longer feels endless. He sat quietly with those words for a long time. The kind of quiet that no longer feels empty, only thoughtful. The diner had grown almost completely still now. Even the kitchen sounds had faded. Only the low hum of lights, the ticking clock, and the soft music from the radio remained. Outside the window, the horizon carried the faintest trace of blue-gray light. Night was slowly loosening its hold on the sky. The waitress poured herself a small cup of coffee and sat down across from him one final time. Neither of them seemed hurried anymore. Some conversations arrive in life unexpectedly, yet leave behind something lasting long after the moment ends. And perhaps that is because the human heart remembers kindness differently than it remembers almost anything else. The waitress wrapped both hands around her cup and smiled faintly. "You know something strange about people?" she asked gently. He looked up. "Most people are much harder on themselves than God ever is." The sentence caught him off guard, because lately, his own thoughts had become relentless. Every mistake replayed repeatedly. Every failure magnified. Every weakness quietly turned into proof that he was somehow falling behind in life. But hearing those words spoken aloud made him realize how exhausting it had become to live beneath the constant weight of self-judgment. The waitress looked toward the window thoughtfully. "People carry guilt for years," she said softly. "Sometimes over things God already wanted them to release a long time ago." He stared quietly into the fading reflection of the diner lights against the glass. And deep down, he knew exactly what she meant. There were regrets he still carried silently. Moments he wished he could undo. Words he wished he had spoken differently. Choices he still revisited during sleepless nights. And perhaps, part of his exhaustion had come from dragging old pain behind him everywhere he went. The waitress reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a small folded piece of paper. Its edges were worn and softened with age. She placed it gently on the table between them. "I used to keep this with me after my husband died," she explained quietly. He unfolded it carefully. Only a few words were written there in faded ink. "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." Matthew 11 verse 28. Simple words. Yet something about reading them in that quiet diner before sunrise made them feel deeply personal. Not religious. Not distant. Personal. As though God himself understood the exhaustion people carry beneath their ordinary lives. The waitress smiled softly. "Rest isn't always sleep," she murmured. "Sometimes rest is finally realizing you don't have to keep carrying every burden alone." The room became still again after that. And for the first time in years, he allowed himself to consider the possibility that maybe healing did not require becoming someone entirely different. Maybe healing simply began with honesty, with slowing down, with allowing grace to reach the tired places inside him he had hidden for far too long. Outside, birds had begun singing faintly somewhere beyond the quiet streets. Morning was arriving now. Slowly, tenderly, without rushing, and sitting there beneath the fading warmth of diner lights, he realized something unexpected. The heaviness inside him had not disappeared completely during the night, but it no longer felt impossible to carry, because hope had quietly entered the room sometime between the rain, the silence, and the gentle kindness of a stranger who understood tired hearts. He folded the small piece of paper carefully and stared at it for a few quiet moments. The words lingered inside him long after he stopped reading them. Come to me, not run faster, not pretend harder, not carry more, just come. There was something deeply gentle about that invitation, especially for a person who had spent so long believing rest had to be earned. The waitress stood slowly from the booth and walked toward the coffee machine again. The sky outside continued brightening little by little. Street lights began fading against the approaching dawn, and the city that had felt lonely hours earlier was slowly beginning to wake again. A delivery truck rolled quietly through the intersection outside. Somewhere farther away, a bakery switched on its lights. Morning routines were beginning, life moving forward once more. Yet inside the diner, time still felt slow and peaceful, almost protected from the rush waiting outside. He looked around carefully again at the old diner. The worn booths, the faded photographs hanging crookedly on the walls, the old clock, the soft music still drifting through the room. Hours earlier, he had entered this place carrying exhaustion so heavy he could barely understand it himself. But now, something inside him felt different. Not fixed, not suddenly transformed, just lighter. And perhaps real healing often feels exactly like that. Not dramatic, not loud, just the quiet return of hope to places that had slowly grown numb. The waitress returned holding the coffee pot once more. One last refill before you go, she asked gently. He smiled faintly and nodded. This time the smile came naturally, without effort, without pretending. As she poured the coffee, she glanced toward the window where dawnlight now rested softly across the wet pavement outside. Funny thing about mornings, she said quietly. No matter how dark the night becomes, morning still arrives. He followed her gaze toward the brightening streets. And suddenly, the sentence felt larger than the sunrise itself. Because maybe that truth applied to more than skies. Maybe it applied to people too. Maybe there are seasons where hearts pass through long nights of grief, confusion, exhaustion, loneliness. Yet somehow, light still returns slowly over time. Not because life becomes perfect, but because God continues meeting people gently inside their darkness until they can see hope again. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Words no longer felt necessary. The silence itself had become comforting. Then eventually he reached for his wallet, but the waitress shook her head softly before he could say anything. It's already taken care of, she smiled. He looked confused. By who? She gave a small shrug. An early customer from a while ago. He frowned slightly, but there wasn't anyone else here. The waitress only smiled again and began wiping the counter quietly. And somehow, that small mystery stayed with him. Not because it needed explanation, but because kindness often arrives quietly in life without asking for recognition. He stood slowly from the booth and slipped the folded scripture verse carefully into his pocket. Then he looked around the diner one final time. The place no longer felt random. It felt meaningful somehow, like one of those rare moments life gives a person exactly when their soul can no longer keep carrying everything alone. He walked toward the front door slowly. The waitress gave him a gentle nod as he reached for the handle. Then just before he stepped outside, she spoke one final sentence into the quietness of the early morning. "Be patient with yourself," she said softly. "Healing takes time, but tired hearts can heal too." And with those words resting quietly inside him, he stepped back out into the world. The air outside felt colder now, but no longer empty. The rain had completely passed. Fresh drops still rested along the sidewalks and rooftops, quietly reflecting the pale light of early morning. For a moment, he simply stood there beneath the fading streetlights and looked up at the sky. The storm clouds were gone, and in their place, soft morning light slowly spread across the horizon. Not suddenly, not dramatically, just quietly, the same way healing often enters a person's life. Little by little, he placed his hands into his pockets and began walking again through the peaceful streets. But this time, his steps felt slower, calmer. The pressure inside his chest no longer felt as sharp as it had earlier that night. And although his problems still existed, something important had changed inside him. For the first time in a very long while, he no longer felt completely alone carrying them. As the city slowly awakened around him, he noticed small things he would normally rush past without seeing. Steam rising from a bakery window, birds resting along telephone wires, the quiet sound of someone sweeping the sidewalk outside a nearby shop. Ordinary moments, yet somehow, they felt beautiful again. And maybe that is one of the first signs of hope returning to the soul. When exhausted hearts slowly begin noticing life again. Eventually he reached a small bridge overlooking the river that passed through the city. The water moved calmly beneath the morning light. Steady, unhurried. He stopped there for a while, resting his arms along the railing as cool wind moved softly around him. Then very quietly, almost like a whisper carried into the morning air, he prayed. Not with perfect words, not with long speeches, just honesty. God, I think I'm ready to stop carrying everything alone. And somehow, in that peaceful moment beside the river, those simple words felt enough. The sun slowly rose higher beyond the buildings. One light touched the water, touched the streets, touched his tired face standing quietly above the river. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, his heart felt still. Not because life had suddenly become easy, but because somewhere during the long night, hope had found him again. Very gently, very quietly, like morning light arriving after rain. And with that quiet peace resting inside him, he finally turned and walked home. He walked slowly through the quiet morning streets while the city continued waking around him. Storefront lights flickered on one by one. A bus moved through the intersection carrying tired early morning passengers. Somewhere nearby, fresh bread drifted through the cold air from a bakery beginning its day. Life was continuing. Simple, ordinary, steady, and strangely, for the first time in many months, he no longer felt disconnected from it. When he finally reached his apartment building, He stopped outside for a moment and looked up toward the windows above him. The same building, the same life, the same responsibilities waiting for him later that day. Nothing outside had truly changed overnight. Yet something inside him had. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough. Enough to breathe a little easier. Enough to believe exhaustion would not define the rest of his life forever. He unlocked the apartment door quietly and stepped inside. The room greeted him with familiar stillness. A jacket hanging over the chair. Unread mail resting on the kitchen counter. Dimly sunlight spreading slowly across the floor. Only hours earlier, this same apartment had felt unbearably heavy. But now, it simply felt quiet. And there's a difference between loneliness and quiet. Loneliness drains the soul. Quiet gives the soul space to rest. He walked toward the window and opened it slightly. Cool morning air moved gently through the room. In the distance, church bells rang softly somewhere beyond the city buildings. Slow, peaceful, steady. He closed his eyes for a moment and simply listened. And while standing there in the calmness of early morning, he realized something important. Healing had not begun the moment someone gave him advice. Healing had begun the moment he finally stopped hiding his exhaustion from himself. The moment he admitted he was tired. The moment he allowed grace to meet him honestly inside his weakness. He reached into his pocket and unfolded the small piece of paper once more. Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. This time, the words no longer felt distant. They felt personal, real, alive somehow. And perhaps that is what people forget during difficult seasons. God does not wait for human hearts to become perfect before drawing near to them. He meets people gently in the middle of their weariness, in the middle of uncertainty, in the middle of nights where the soul quietly whispers, I cannot carry this alone anymore. The morning sunlight continued filling the room little by little, and after months of restless nights, he finally did something simple. He lay down on the couch near the window, closed his eyes, and allowed himself to rest. Not out of defeat, not from giving up, but from finally understanding that even tired hearts deserve peace too. And as morning light rested softly across the quiet apartment, sleep finally came to him gently. Not the restless kind of sleep filled with tension and endless thoughts, but deep, peaceful rest. The kind the soul had been searching for far longer than the body realized. Outside the open window, the sounds of the waking city continued quietly in the distance. Birds moving through the pale sky, cars humming softly far below, wind brushing gently against nearby buildings. Ordinary sounds, yet together, they felt calming, like life itself whispering that not every season remains heavy forever. And while he rested there beside the window, something inside him slowly loosened. The fear, the pressure, the exhausting need to carry every burden alone. For so long, he had believed strength meant never slowing down, never admitting weakness, never allowing himself to need help. But real strength is often much quieter than people imagine. Sometimes strength looks like honesty. Sometimes it looks like asking God for peace. Sometimes it looks like finally allowing your tired heart to rest. Hours later, Sunlight had fully filled the apartment when he finally opened his eyes again. For a moment, he simply lay there listening to the stillness around him. And immediately, he noticed something different. The heaviness inside his chest was no longer overwhelming. Not completely gone, but softer now, like a stone that had finally begun moving farther into the distance. He sat up slowly and looked toward the window where warm afternoon light drifted gently through the curtains. Then, without even realizing it at first, he smiled. A small, quiet smile. The kind that comes not from excitement, but from peace. Life would still have difficult days ahead. There would still be responsibilities, questions, unexpected struggles. But now he understood something he had forgotten for a very long time. No human heart was created to carry life alone. And perhaps that had been the true gift hidden inside that long night. Not answers to every problem, not a perfect future, but the quiet reminder that God remains near to weary souls, especially weary souls. Years later, he would still remember that small diner sometimes, the rain against the windows, the soft music, the old clock ticking through the night, and the gentle kindness of a stranger who somehow recognized exhaustion hiding behind ordinary eyes. But more than anything else, he would remember the feeling that found him there. Hope. Quiet hope. The kind that arrives softly, without noise, without force, and slowly teaches a tired heart how to live again. And maybe tonight, as you rest here listening quietly in the darkness, your heart needed this reminder too. That exhaustion is not the end of your story. That peace can return slowly. That healing often begins in the smallest moments. And that God still walks gently beside tired souls, even through long nights. So tonight, as the world around you grows quieter, I do not want you to carry every burden into tomorrow. Some things can wait until morning. Some worries do not need answers tonight. And some wounds begin healing only after the soul finally becomes still long enough to rest. Maybe there is something heavy you have been carrying lately. A fear you rarely speak about. A disappointment that still lingers quietly inside your chest. A season of life that feels uncertain. And perhaps, like the man in the story, you have become so used to surviving that you forgot peace was still possible for you too. But listen carefully tonight. God has not abandoned you in your tiredness. He has not stepped away from you because you feel emotionally worn down. And he is not disappointed that your heart sometimes grows weary from carrying too much for too long. Because even strong people become tired sometimes. Even kind people struggle quietly. Even faithful people occasionally lose sight of hope in difficult seasons. Yet through all of it, God remains patient, steady, gentle. Maybe healing will not happen all at once. Maybe peace will return slowly, like sunrise arriving after a long stormy night. But slow healing is still healing. Small steps still matter. Quiet hope still matters. And the heart can recover in ways we often do not notice immediately. So tonight, release the pressure to have everything figured out. Release the fear of tomorrow for a little while. Release the exhausting need to hold every piece of life together on your own. And instead, rest. Not because every problem has disappeared, but because your soul deserves moments of peace too. Somewhere beyond the noise of this world, beyond rushing thoughts, beyond fear and exhaustion. God is still watching over you tonight, still walking beside you quietly, still carrying the parts of your story that feel too heavy for your hands alone. And while your eyes slowly grow heavier, may your heart remember something very gently. You are allowed to rest. You are allowed to breathe. You are allowed to stop carrying everything for a little while. Because even long nights eventually give way to morning. And even tired hearts can heal. And perhaps that is what so many people quietly forget while moving through difficult seasons of life. That the human heart was never designed to live without gentleness for too long. Not everything heavy inside a person can be fixed through productivity. Not every wound responds to pressure. And not every exhausted soul needs more advice. Sometimes, a weary heart simply needs permission to rest. The world often teaches people to ignore their inner exhaustion, to keep performing, keep achieving, keep appearing strong, even while something deep inside them slowly grows silent from carrying too much for too long. And after a while, many people become strangers to their own emotions. They continue smiling, continue working, continue answering everyone else's needs. Yet somewhere beneath all the movement, their soul quietly waits for stillness. Maybe that is why peaceful moments feel so emotional sometimes. Because deep down, human beings are not only searching for success, they are searching for peace, for safety, for a place where they no longer need to hold themselves together so tightly. And perhaps tonight, you have been searching for that too. There are people listening right now who have spent months carrying silent pressure nobody else fully understands. Pressure to succeed. Pressure to stay emotionally strong. Pressure to pretend everything is fine even when life feels uncertain. And slowly, that pressure begins hardening the heart. Not because the person becomes cold, but because exhaustion teaches people how to emotionally survive instead of truly rest. But God never asked the human soul to survive without rest. Throughout Scripture, again and again, God leads people beside quiet places, deserts, mountains, still waters, gardens, lonely roads beneath the stars. Not because God enjoys isolation, but because silence often becomes the place where wounded hearts finally hear grace clearly again. And maybe one of the saddest things about modern life is how rarely people allow themselves true stillness anymore. The mind stays crowded constantly. Notifications, noise, pressure, endless comparison. The soul barely has room to breathe. Yet somewhere beneath all that noise, many hearts are simply longing for peace they cannot explain. The man in the story did not find healing because all his problems suddenly disappeared overnight. His life was still imperfect when morning arrived. But something important changed. He stopped carrying his pain in isolation. He stopped hiding from his exhaustion long enough to finally admit, I cannot do this alone anymore. And strangely, that honesty became the beginning of peace. Because healing often begins the moment pretending ends. There are some people who have become so accustomed to emotional heaviness, they no longer remember what inner calm even feels like. They wake up anxious, sleep anxious, move through entire weeks carrying invisible tension inside their chest. And eventually, they begin believing this is simply what life will always feel like. but hearts can slowly recover. Not instantly, not perfectly, but gently. The same way winter slowly gives way to spring without rushing. A person does not heal by hating themselves for struggling. A soul does not become lighter through constant self-criticism. And fear has never been a good place for peace to grow. Sometimes healing begins with something much quieter. Honesty, grace, rest, small moments of kindness, a prayer whispered softly in the dark, a moment where the heart finally stops running. And maybe tonight, God is inviting you into that kind of quietness. Not to perform, not to prove your worth, not to carry every burden perfectly, but simply to rest in His presence for a little while. To breathe again, to loosen the grip fear has held on your thoughts, to remember that your value is never based on how exhausted you can become while trying to hold life together alone. Because even now, while this quiet night continues around you, God still sees the parts of your life nobody else notices. The hidden worries, the private disappointments, the silent overthinking, the emotional fatigue hidden behind ordinary routines. And somehow, His compassion remains gentle toward all of it. Perhaps that is what grace truly feels like. Not pressure, not shame, not perfection, just the quiet realization that even exhausted hearts are deeply loved by God. Now, before you close your eyes tonight, come closer to me for a little while. Leave the noise of the world behind for this moment. Leave the pressure. Leave the racing thoughts. Leave the heaviness you have been quietly carrying through the day. And simply rest here with me. I know there are nights when your mind feels crowded with worries you cannot fully explain. Nights when your heart grows tired from thinking too much, carrying too much, fearing too much. Even when nobody else notices it. I notice. I see the exhaustion hidden behind your silence. I see the moments you pretend to be stronger than you truly feel. And I have never looked at your weariness with disappointment. Only compassion. You do not have to carry every burden alone anymore. Give those burdens to me tonight. The fears about tomorrow. The pressure resting on your shoulders. The sadness you rarely speak about. The memories that still ache quietly inside your heart. Place them gently into my hands now. You were never created to walk through life without my peace beside you. There are thoughts that have kept you awake for too many nights. Thoughts that circle endlessly through your mind after the world grows quiet. But tonight, let those thoughts become still. You do not need to solve your entire future before resting. You do not need to hold your whole life together perfectly tonight. Rest now. I am already present in tomorrow. I know the hidden places inside your heart that still feel wounded. The disappointments, the loneliness, the silent battles nobody else fully understands. And yet, my love for you has never weakened. Not once. Even during seasons where you felt emotionally distant. I remained nearer. Even in moments where you questioned your own strength. I continued holding you gently. Tonight, allow my peace to settle slowly over your thoughts like calm rain falling in the darkness. Let your breathing soften. Let tension leave your body little by little. Let your heart stop bracing itself against every fear. You are safe here with me. Some of your exhaustion has come from trying to be everything for everyone. Trying not to disappoint people. trying to stay strong through every difficult moment, trying to carry pain silently so nobody else becomes concerned. But I never asked you to live beneath endless pressure. I created your soul for peace too. And tonight, I want you to rest without fear for a little while. There are things worrying you right now that you cannot control. Situations you cannot fully fix. Questions you cannot yet answer. But while you sleep tonight, I will still be watching over your life. Still guiding paths you cannot yet see. Still protecting your heart in ways you may never fully understand. So release your fear little by little now. You do not have to remain emotionally guarded every moment. You can rest in my care. And if your heart has grown tired from disappointment, come closer to me. If your mind has become weary from overthinking, come closer to me. If life has felt heavier than usual lately, come closer to me. Because I do not move away from exhausted hearts. I draw near to them gently. Tonight, I want you to sleep peacefully. Not with fear. Not with pressure. Not with the feeling that you must carry tomorrow alone. But with quiet trust. Knowing that while you rest, my presence remains beside you. My love remains over you. And my peace remains surrounding you through every hour of this night. So close your eyes slowly now, my child, and let your soul become quiet. I am here, and you do not need to carry everything alone anymore. Now, the night has become quieter than before. Most of the world is asleep by now. The rushing of the day has faded. The noise has softened. And perhaps for the first time today, you are finally still long enough to hear your own heart clearly. Some people spend entire days surrounded by noise, yet still feel lonely underneath it all. They answer messages, go to work, speak kindly to others, smile when needed. But late at night, when everything finally becomes silent, they quietly realize how tired they truly are. Not only physically, but inwardly. And maybe tonight, that is where you find yourself. Somewhere between exhaustion and hope. Somewhere between overthinking and trying to rest. Somewhere between wanting peace and struggling to fully slow your mind down. But do not fight this quiet moment. Let it hold you gently for a while. The night was never meant to be feared completely. There is something sacred about these late hours. The slower breathing, the still air, the dim light resting across the room, the feeling that the world has finally stopped asking things from you for a little while. And perhaps that is why hearts often become more honest after midnight. Because there is no audience anymore. Only silence. Only thoughts. Only God quietly remaining near. Right now, you do not need to become a different person before resting. You do not need to solve every problem tonight. You do not need to figure out your entire future before sleep arrives. The pressure can loosen now. Even if only little by little. Some worries look heavier at night than they truly are. Some fears grow louder in darkness simply because the world becomes quiet enough for them to echo. But not every thought deserves your full attention tonight. Some thoughts should simply be placed into God's hands and left there until morning. Listen carefully to the stillness around you, the softness of the room, the gentle rhythm of your breathing, the quiet space beneath every thought. There is peace here. Not loud peace, not dramatic peace, Just calmness slowly settling into tired places inside you. Perhaps today asked too much from you. Perhaps life has felt emotionally crowded lately. Too many responsibilities. Too many expectations. Too much pressure to keep carrying everything perfectly. And after a while, people forget what it feels like to truly rest without guilt. But rest was never something shameful. Even in scripture, quiet places mattered. Mountains, gardens, open skies, still water, lonely roads where prayers were whispered softly into the night. Again and again, God met weary people in peaceful places, not to rush them, not to shame them, but to give their hearts room to breathe again. So tonight, let this moment become one of those peaceful places for you. No pretending, no performance, no pressure to hold yourself together perfectly. Only rest, only quietness, only the slow realization that you are deeply loved even in exhausted seasons of life. Outside, the night continues moving gently forward, wind brushing softly against distant trees, clouds drifting slowly across the dark sky, streetlights glowing quietly somewhere far away. And here in this moment, you are safe enough to finally slow down too. There are some nights where healing does not arrive through answers. It arrives through stillness, through finally becoming quiet long enough for the soul to unclench, through realizing that peace is not always something dramatic. Sometimes peace is simply the absence of pressure for a little while. So let your thoughts drift more slowly now. Let your breathing soften naturally. Let your body rest against the bed without carrying the full weight of tomorrow. Morning will come later. Tomorrow will arrive at its own time. But tonight, there is nothing left to prove. Nothing left to carry alone. Only rest. And while sleep slowly draws closer, may your heart remember this very gently. You are not failing because you became tired. You are human, and even weary hearts deserve tenderness too. And while sleep slowly draws closer, may your heart remember this very gently. You are not failing because you became tired. You are human, and even weary hearts deserve tenderness too. Somewhere outside, a distant light still glows in a quiet window. A car passes through empty streets. Wind moves gently through the darkness. Small ordinary moments continuing softly beneath the night sky. And somehow, there is comfort in knowing the world does not need to rush right now. There are nights when the soul grows tired from carrying thoughts that were never meant to be carried this long. Old conversations, unanswered questions, pressure about the future, the quiet fear of disappointing people. And after a while, the mind becomes so used to tension that peace itself begins to feel unfamiliar. But peace was never meant to feel distant from you. Sometimes people believe they must hold everything together perfectly before they are allowed to rest. But life has never worked that way. Human hearts become weary. Thoughts become heavy. Faith becomes quiet sometimes. Even strong people reach moments where they no longer know what to do with the weight they are carrying inside. And yet, God remains gentle through all of it. Perhaps that is what makes grace so different from the pressure of the world. The world demands constant performance, constant movement, constant proof. But grace meets people in their exhaustion and says, you can rest now. So tonight, allow yourself to stop reaching for control over every unknown thing waiting ahead. The future does not need to be solved before morning. The mind does not need to rehearse every fear again tonight. And your heart does not need to stay emotionally guarded while trying to fall asleep. Just breathe naturally, slowly, quietly. Feel the calmness of the room around you, the softness beneath you, the steady rhythm of the night continuing outside. Everything is becoming still now, including you. There are moments in life when healing happens so quietly. A person almost misses it completely. Not through dramatic change, not through sudden certainty, but through small peaceful moments that slowly teach the heart it no longer has to live in survival mode all the time. Perhaps tonight is becoming one of those moments. The thoughts that felt loud earlier are softer now. The tension inside your chest is easing little by little. Even your breathing has changed. Slower now. Calmer. Less guarded. And maybe your soul has been needing this kind of stillness for a very long time. Outside the window, the sky remains dark and peaceful. Clouds drifting slowly. Stars hidden quietly behind them. The world resting. And here in the quietness, you can rest too. Not because every burden has disappeared, but because some burdens can wait until tomorrow. No one was created to carry endless pressure without rest. Not emotionally, not mentally, not spiritually. And sometimes the holiest thing a tired person can do is simply become still enough to receive peace again. So let the night hold your thoughts gently now. Let the silence soften your mind. Let sleep come naturally without forcing it. There is nowhere else you need to be. Nothing else you need to solve. Only this quiet moment. Only rest. And while your eyes grow heavier, while the room becomes softer around you, while the night continues its slow, peaceful rhythm, remember this. Even now, God is still near. Quietly, patiently, faithfully, like light remaining beside the ocean long after the sun has disappeared beneath the horizon. The day is finished now. The striving can grow quiet, and your heart can finally rest. The room has grown even quieter now, almost as if the night itself is whispering everything into stillness. There is nothing more you need to hold on to tonight. The conversations are over. The responsibilities can wait until morning. Even the thoughts that once felt urgent are beginning to fade into the distance now. Little by little, somewhere far away, the world is still moving. But here, in this quiet moment, everything is slower, gentler, softer, and perhaps your soul has been longing for softness for a very long time. Let the darkness around you feel peaceful now. Not empty, peaceful, like a calm sky stretching silently above sleeping streets, like rain resting quietly on rooftops after midnight, like the final glow of a candle flickering softly in a silent room. Your breathing is slower now. Your body is resting more heavily. The muscles in your face have softened. Even your thoughts no longer feel as sharp as before. Sleep is drawing closer naturally, without force, without effort. There are moments during the night when the soul finally realizes it no longer needs to stay alert all the time. This is one of those moments. Nothing is chasing you here. Nothing is demanding something from you. You are allowed to become completely still now. Imagine standing beside a quiet ocean before sunrise. The horizon dark and endless. Waves moving slowly beneath the fading stars. Cool air brushing gently against your skin. No noise. No pressure. Only calmness stretching endlessly around you. And somewhere within that calmness, your heart finally begins to loosen the weight it has carried for too long. Some burdens disappear all at once. Others slowly dissolve over time like mist fading beneath morning light. But either way, you do not need to carry them through this night alone. The silence around you is no longer heavy now. It has become comforting, protective somehow, like being wrapped inside stillness itself. And as your mind continues drifting further away from the noise of the day, peace is quietly taking its place. No more striving tonight. No more rehearsing tomorrow. No more replaying the past. Just rest. Simple, quiet rest. The night sky remains above you even now. Clouds moving slowly across unseen stars. Wind passing softly through distant trees. Creation itself resting peacefully in the darkness. And somewhere within all this quietness, God remains near. Not loudly, not forcefully, but faithfully, like steady light glowing through a distant window before dawn. Your eyes are becoming heavier now. Your thoughts are drifting more slowly. The edges of the world feel softer, further away, and sleep is beginning to wrap gently around your mind like warm rain falling across peaceful water. There is nothing left to figure out tonight. Nothing left to prove. Nothing left to fear in this moment. Only rest. Only quietness. Only the slow, peaceful rhythm of the night carrying you gently towards sleep. And as the final hours of darkness continue passing quietly around you, may your heart remain calm. May your mind remain still. May your sleep become peaceful and deep. And may the presence of God remain beside you through every silent moment until morning arrives again. Now rest. The night is holding you gently, and sleep is finally here.